You're listening to The Coaching Divas, a podcast for everyone navigating the twists and turns of corporate life.
Follow along as we chat through common workplace situations and extend the coach approach to help you handle them with ease.
We offer a cross-sectional view that spans generations, positions, workplaces, and lifestyles.
We're your hosts,
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, and we are
The Coaching Divas.
Welcome back to the pod. Today we're diving into part 2 of our series on performance reviews. Last time we explored the manager's side, how to deliver feedback that's constructive and motivating. But today we're flipping the script and focusing on you, the person receiving the performance review. Receiving a performance review can be daunting, but it's also a powerful opportunity to learn, grow, and advance in your career. In this episode, we'll explore how to approach your review with the right mindset, how to interpret the feedback you receive, and most importantly, how to use that feedback to fuel your professional growth. So whether you're heading into your next review or just want to be ready for when it comes, stay tuned because we're diving in.
Oh, I love this topic. This is always exciting.
Who doesn't love getting a performance review?
No, nobody loves getting a performance review.
Nobody likes being told what they're bad at, right?
Very true.
True.
We only want to be praised, and it's hard. It's criticism.
It is. Well, you shouldn't take it as criticism, though, right? These are, as we talked earlier, growing edges, right? Right. Where are there the opportunities where we can grow into our role, grow into our sense of responsibilities? So it should not be taken as criticism, but as opportunities, for sure.
Having that growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a bit about growing edges. What does that mean to you when you hear that word?
I was going to push it back to you, Daniela, because I think you're the one who introduced it last.
Well, so I mean, we learned about it through our coaching, and I use it often now when I talk to anybody about where I see an opportunity. And so for myself, it's a term I'm constantly using because if I use the word issues, if I use the word I have to learn or I have to do better, to me, there's a bit of a negative tone to it. But when I use the term, what's my growing edge for the next quarter, it implies a positive. It implies that I am in a constant learning state. And that's what I think I do well in. So what I would love for people to be able to walk away from this conversation with is the idea that you're never fully complete. There's always opportunity for more. And to approach my performance review with my manager from that lens to say, hey, I've done really well in all of these things, but here are the growing edges that I see myself moving into. And that helps align the conversation around my career progression or a new subject matter or a new business area I want to learn about. Like it to me, it's a powerful way of reanimating the idea of I suck at something.
It feels less confrontational. It feels less critique, judgy. It feels more like a genuine offering to help me succeed in the long run.
Yeah. And I think, too, we need to keep in mind as well, it's not just for people climbing up the managerial ladder, right? It's also for people who are individual contributors. You know, if you work for any sort of industry or one organization even, you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again for the next 5, 10, 15 years, right? You want to have new interests, new subject matters that you get involved in, new processes, new technologies, new philosophies, right? So growing edge really implies improving either managerial skills or implying your own personal skill set, improving on your knowledge set even, right? What's the newest and coolest thing that's coming up? Because the one thing we will never get away from is change. Change is always coming.
I'm glad you said that because it actually reminds me of something we talked about last month, which is for managers not to just say, oh, you're crushing it, keep doing what you're doing. If you're on the receiving end of that and your manager's not giving you more, how do you ask for your growing edges? How do you approach that?
That's a great question. And I think as an employee, you have every right to ask your manager, where's your organization going? What new markets are we getting into? What new technologies, what new processes, what new fields of interest are there out there? And see if you have an opportunity to learn more about those fields. Because there's a growing edge right now. Because if you want to stick with the organization that you're with and you really enjoy working there, why not grow with the organization as well?
Yeah. And I think if we think about where ChatGPT has come from, generative AI is a big hot topic in all companies right now. And I look at it, and I invite everybody to look at it as a growing edge, right? Because you're going to learn a new way of doing something that's different. And you should be recognized for that in your performance. And maybe if you are in a position that you've been in for a while and you are an individual contributor, you can approach it in your performance conversations with your manager from the lens of, hey, I've been reading a lot about generative AI. I know it's new in our company. I would like to participate in a conference, in a training opportunity, in a potentially a launch of a new product within the company. Give your manager the fuel to take that forward and be your advocate for those things, because all those things cost money. And in a company where things are tight, you have a way to actually differentiate yourself and actually grow your own skill set in perhaps something that is so new that you can be considered a pioneer. Wow, that looks good on a performance review.
And that's a great example to use as well, Daniela. I mean, if you demonstrate, I'm interested in generative AI, what else are you interested in, right? So anytime a new opportunity, again, technology is a great place where there's a lot of change, but there's also changes in marketplace, this whole social scene. So it demonstrates that, I am willing to learn, and people know that. And people remember that you are the one person who was really interested in knowing what's next. And so, so from a performance review perspective, you can always just say, I want to know what's next. What's my growing edge? My opportunity to learn more, keeping that growth mindset. And that'll always serve you well going forward.
So what do we do if our manager doesn't initiate performance review conversations and comes to us once a year?
Initiate them yourself.
Ooh,
I said this last time as well. Performance reviews are a point in time. Performance happens all year round. If I add another layer to that, you are the owner of your performance. And so if you are the one performing, why can't you be the one following up and asking and checking in? And if I were to think about what that looks like year round, there's different elements. I mean, even just being able to ask your manager in, one-on-ones every couple months or whatever it is for feedback. Are there things that I'm doing that you're seeing that, I could be doing better? That's part of
differently.
Or differently. Yeah. That's part of a performance all year round, owning it if my manager's not coming forth with it. The other aspect too is asking your manager, what's the expectation here? If they give you a project, don't just say, okay, yep, I'll take it and figure it out. Ask them, what's the expectation? What are you looking for me to own versus other team members? How am I being measured?
I always like to use, what does success look like?
Yep, that's another way to ask. What does success look like? And what you're doing by asking those questions is subconsciously for the manager, they're actually having to think about what their expectations are, think about what success looks like, think about what you're going to be measured against. And when they tell you, subconsciously, they're committing to that. And so when you really fast forward all the way down to your performance review, let's say at the end of the year, they should be going back on all those thoughts, all those expectations that they were setting with you in your one-on-ones, and then evaluating, hey, did they hit that? Did they go above it? Did they miss the mark? And it leaves you in a state where you're not second guessing yourself because your manager set the scene right from the moment you asked. But it starts with you asking if they're not offering it.
Good point. And when you have that conversation, make sure that you're in agreement with what success looks like, right? Because, the management may not know exactly, and I've seen this too, they don't really have a strong appreciation as to what's involved in some of the activities that they ask you to do, right? Here's your objective. Can you hit this? And you're like, whoa, that's huge. How do you expect me to do that on my own within 12 months?
Yeah. Or I would say sometimes you're like, okay, you know what? I don't know any better. So, okay, yep, let's set that as the objective. But then I think the key part here is that it's a continuing conversation. It's never just a point in time you set in stone and then we evaluate at the end of the year. It's how are you then coming forward when you get new information and you find out and figure out that, hey, you know what? This objective is actually impossible, not a stretch. It's now in impossible territory. That's now for you, if your manager's not offering it up, you can set it as an agenda item for your one-on-one, and you can reset expectations with your manager and make sure the two of you get aligned to say, hey, after I dove into this objective is unreachable. Maybe in 2 years we can reach this, but I think this would be a more like revised, still a stretch, but like we could hit this more. Are you open to changing the metric, changing the objective for this project? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, no problem. Let's adjust. Or maybe they have to take it back to their leader. Who knows? But the key is you're bringing it forward and you're owning having that conversation ongoing throughout the year, because that's you owning your performance.
It is. And the other key thing, and I think is implied here, but just to kind of state it, is make sure it's in writing. And you physically update your performance expectations. Because, management's got a lot of things on their mind. They've got a lot of people they have to look after. They may not always recall this conversation and the specificity, that's a word, of what was discussed, right? Make sure it's clearly understood what the expectation is. Because for sure, sometimes the goals are just so huge that management doesn't have a real true appreciation as to what's engaged, because it's not just one activity. There's the technologies, there's the process, there's the communication, there's the training, there's the follow through. There's so much more involved in things these days than just do this, boom, right?
Yeah.
The other layer to that, and I will flip it just a little because we're thinking of the positive manager. You might be dealing with a very negative manager, right? Mm-hmm. Who may not fully support you in your objectives. So writing it down, absolutely important, because it's you creating that paper trail. Bringing it up in the one-on-ones is absolutely important. But what do we do if our manager says, oh, you're not capable of that? You're not there yet. For whatever their bias is, but let's face it, we're humans. We all have a bias. How do we work through that sticky situation?
My first instinct would be to ask, what exactly do they mean by that? And get them to help you understand where their bias is coming from. And not just
in the moment, you thinking.
Yeah, well, you just have to kind of prepare yourself to always, I don't want to use the word challenge, but definitely ask for clarification on statements like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, what exactly does that mean? Is it a skill set issue? Is that a communication issue? Where exactly is that? What's what I'm looking for? Objective, or where that opinion? I'll use the word opinion coming from. Because at that point, it just sounds like it's an opinion, not necessarily a thought out conclusion.
Yeah. There's a couple layers too in exactly how you phrased it, Daniela, because the first thing I think most people will have to do is not take that personally.
Mm-hmm.
Not take that and be like, wow, okay, that's how you see me. And then shrink themselves in that moment. And as soon as you shrink yourself and you don't say anything, you've accepted it. And so the first part would be like, okay, let me try to hear that objectively and now approach it objectively. And if I were to approach it objectively, very similar to Claudia, I would say, can you help me understand where the gaps are? I will not offer examples because I don't want to put words in their mouth. I just tell me where the gaps are. And once they articulate those gaps, my next question would be, okay, how do I close those?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm putting it back on them to give me concrete performance feedback in the moment, not just their opinion.
And you nailed it. It's in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, Misha, because I do kind of just, procedurally, what should you be doing? But you kind of forget sometimes inside, your heart is probably pounding like crazy.
Yeah.
You may get a little bit of the sweats and, you're not cool and comfortable like you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say, hey, man, let's talk about this further. It's just, you got to figure out how to calm yourself down. Maybe just take a couple of deep breaths. And
for those of our listeners, if anyone's seen the movie Inside Out, anger, that anger emotion might be coming up for you.
Yeah.
And you have to think about what joy always does.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I just saw that the other day.
And now there's a new one, embarrassment and anxiety kind of throwing in. And if you like Inside Out too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Right?
Anxiety is probably right beside anger in that moment because you're angry about what they say, but you have anxiety of how to approach it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you get caught up in this whirlwind of anxiety trying to solve things like in the moment.
Yeah.
Rather than just stepping back. And the other thing to keep in mind is you really don't know what's going on with your manager.
True.
Right? They have a team of people. They're managing up, they're managing down, and they're also managing left and right. So anything that they say is being influenced by all of these other factors.
Yeah.
May have absolutely nothing to do with you. It just doesn't align to some objective or some personal need or something. And quite frankly, you're not accountable to know that.
Also not an excuse for the manager either.
Absolutely. But it's hard, right? Like, I mean, I can tell you my own personal anecdote. Years ago, I had a manager who didn't give me a review for 4 months. And then at the end of year decided to tell me, so yeah, on your review, we're going to say that you have negative team dynamics. That's your one improvement area.
Oh, jeez.
And you guys know what I do, what I've done. Like, I've always done project delivery. So what? That totally slammed me. Like, in a way that like it was like a personal attack. It felt like a personal attack. And my first question was, well, when did this happen? How did I make someone feel that I've created a negative team dynamic? What was the situation? That's what came up for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I was really disappointed in the situation, and it totally ruined my trust relationship with my manager, because if I did that and made someone feel that way, I would have hoped I would have been told in the moment, so I could course correct right away. And so the outcome of that situation was I could not align with that. And I actually made the statement. I never thought I'd find these words until this day. I remember what I said. I said, if that's the type of individual I've become, then I'm a product of my environment. And I think I need to remove myself.
Wow.
Mm.
Which is really, that was like the core, you hit my core value.
Yeah.
And that's another one. When you're engaging in performance reviews, what are your values?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What do you want to bring forward? How do you want to live those values, right? So you're getting all this feedback from people, but does that really fit who you are as a person?
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. Also, in hearing that story, it brings up, we talk about, owning your performance, bringing it to your own one-on-ones if your manager's not doing it. The other thing is asking for the feedback, right? Because the core of what you just talked about is this could have happened month 1 and they've waited until your performance review to tell you. And so there's also that, as somebody who is being evaluated, are you asking year round, are there things that I could be doing differently? Yeah, monthly.
If you're meeting every other week on the one-on-one.
Yeah.
Add it as an agenda item.
Yeah. And I would add to that as well. So there's the element of feedback, which is, can I be doing anything differently? Am I are there any gaps anywhere? So you're opening the door and giving it to your manager to say whatever they want to say or need to say. But the other element too is, I would say, being more specific. And the example here would be, I always had things that I was looking at myself for, right? I was either creating a standard of, I want to be better in presentation skills. I want to be better at commanding an audience. I want to be better at whatever it was at the time. Okay. And I would bring that forward in those conversations. I would say, something that I've been working on personally is commanding presence in meetings that I'm running with, this stakeholder group. We had a meeting last week with that stakeholder group. You were in there. If you were to think about how I ran that, how I facilitated, do you have any feedback? And so you can also be really specific about the things that you're working on, or even if that relates to your core values, and ask for those specific things. I would also say, let your manager know that those are things that you have top of mind. Lean on them to say, hey, I'm trying to work on my presentation skills, even if it's not on your goals. And it's a skill that I want to develop. We're going to be in a meeting together tomorrow. I would love feedback from you after that meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or as we discussed earlier, rather than using the word feedback, how about what's my growing edge when it comes to my presentation skills, right? Right. Always kind of have that looking forward kind of mentality, as opposed to correcting what was done. Because once it's been done, it's done. You can't go back and fix it. Right. But going forward, where are the opportunities for growth and improvement and fine tuning, even sometimes just a case of fine tuning. So
I love the way you said that, Claudia, because what's come up for me, and I hope this lands with you guys as a suggestion. But, when you are going into those performance discussions or feedback discussions, remember how we did it in coaching? 2 things you did really well and 1 growing edge. Such a lovely format.
It is.
Simple, but you celebrate the awesomeness and then you celebrate the slight opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's straightforward.
Yeah. Because again, performance reviews, it's all about transparency too, right? It's about the transparency between yourself and your manager, making sure that they understand where you're coming from, because they may make a whole bunch of assumptions, and you want to make sure you clarify those assumptions, whether they're true or not. And you want to have that. You really want to have that in these times. And by asking for the growing edges and saying, what did go well? What do I need to continue doing? But also, where's my opportunity for improvement, right? Going forward. Yeah. So, for sure.
And whatever they say, it's one opinion to some extent. So perhaps there's value especially if it's that example of your presentation style and how you show up to an audience.
Yeah.
Seek that feedback from a few others too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just going to say, our managers aren't the only people we get feedback from. In some organizations, performance review cycles include feedback from people that you've worked with throughout the year. So how are we taking these suggestions and applying it to those individuals as well who may be contributing to your performance evaluation?
Yeah, I think a lot depends on how you were engaged with those other individuals, right? What was your involvement with them, right? Mm-hmm. Did you take a leadership role? Were they the lead and you were the activity person?
Yeah.
I don't like the word subordinate, so I'm trying to think of something else to use instead of that word, right? You're just a team member, right, for them to help to lead their engagement, right? So, yeah, you have to understand what the relationship is sometimes to understand how the feedback comes to you, or the growing edges come for you.
I also think, too, it's the same principle of being able to engage those stakeholders. Ask them for feedback or growing edges. Check in with them the same way we're talking about checking in with your manager if they're not offering it to you. And the word that keeps coming to mind right now is blind spots. How do you remove your blind spots throughout the year when it comes to your performance so that your performance review isn't this massive surprise?
Yeah, it's the fine tuning. And can I offer just one thing? I don't think the word feedback is a bad thing.
Okay.
Because there's positive feedback.
Yeah.
Right? You're doing this awesome. Yeah. And then there's the growing edge feedback.
Sure.
Hey,
sure.
Which we used to call negative feedback.
Yeah.
You suck at this, but now it's like
constructive feedback.
I hate that word. What am I constructing? Me as a person? Me and my skill set?
Yes.
Like, that was such a, I had to, for the audience, if I had to pick a pet peeve, that's one. I'm sure we all have them. But feedback is a good thing. I mean, it's sort of the baseline for all of these other things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
And also think of the cultural environment you're in.
Yeah.
Some corporations may not even use feedback anymore, especially if it's a holotocracy. They may have a whole other way of calling it. So that's the other thing to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. The other element outside of feedback that contributes to performance reviews is your self-review. Oftentimes that is part of the process. How do you approach your self-review?
Give yourself some space and some grace. You're a human.
And be honest with yourself. We're not all, as you said last time, we're not all rock stars in everything we do. We could be rock stars in some activities, but not all. And be honest with yourself. Saying, you know what, I totally rocked this part of it. But you know what, these other areas over here, there certainly is some opportunity here for me to improve on this, right? And I could do that by, offers. I need to shadow this person, or I need to spend more time with this department, or I need to take some training courses here. And that way, you have the action item to go forward, right? And to help starting to improve on what you think you should doing, and then make sure you're aligned with your manager on those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Being realistic and objective, I think, was my core. Anytime I was writing my own self-review, I think the other element too is it goes back to, okay, what were my goals? What were my objectives? What were the things I discussed with my manager of expectations and being measured on? And it's speaking to those things objectively. Let me focus on what I did and the results that it drove. And is that aligned to the goal itself or the expectation itself that was set? The other piece too is I believe your self-review inadvertently sets you up for your performance review. So how you write your self-review, the thoughts that you have when you're writing it, if you don't have the balance of being realistic and objective, I think sometimes we hurt ourselves by writing such a strongly perceived self-review, and you're like, oh my God, how could I not get exceeding? Look at all this. And it's because perhaps, in the moment I failed to be objective and recognize that I'm always growing and there has to be opportunities for me to improve and to grow. And so then that impacts my mindset going into my performance review, and it leaves me more exposed to being let down.
Yeah.
I think the other part to that is if the organization has set up a good performance management structure, many of your ways of looking at performance hopefully is anchored in the notion of a SMART goal, right? Where it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And that, I think, removes a lot of what you could call the subjective viewpoint, which ties into the idea of give yourself grace. Like, your perception of crappy may actually not be crappy if you align it back to something that is really articulated through that prism, that lens of SMART. I think, how do we create something objective? Find a model that lets you actually articulate it, because then you can explain it better also to your manager when you're explaining why you think you exceeded.
Also, when you're making those SMART goals, don't make them obviously attainable, because I think that also impacts performance reviews in that, okay, this is an easy goal. You did 10 deals last year. You're committing to do 10 deals this year. To me, as a manager, I'm thinking, okay, well, you did that last year, so you're at the same level of like doing your job, because that's now the standard that you've set. But if you're setting stretch SMART goals where that metric is now, 50% increase, I'm going to do 15. Then there is that opportunity to see, okay, where as a performance, as a result, are you driving more? Are you growing? Are you offering more? So I agree in setting SMART goals, but also make sure that there's a little bit of stretch there so that it shows that progression.
And if you don't want the progression, that's okay too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But be clear on that as part of your thought process and your self-assessment.
Yep.
Like, I like my job by doing as I'm doing, with satisfactory is where I'm at. Okay. But then don't get, annoyed when you get the bonus or the salary increase, right? Keep that in mind.
Yeah. But yeah, to your point, a lot of people are happy just staying where they are. They don't need the added stress. They feel they're getting paid enough. They're okay with the regular salary increase if they get one. A lot of people are happy with that. And there's nothing wrong with that.
You're right. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's making sure as the individual that you translate that to your expectations of your performance evaluation.
Yeah.
So if you're very happy in your job, you're very happy with what you're doing, and you're like, you know what, I just want to come in, do my job, leave. It's mismatched to then at the end of the year have the expectation that you're going to get a top performer exceeding expectations like that.
Very true.
You've got to match those expectations as well.
Very true.
Which realigns back to that notion of be realistic, be objective. Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, we've all had those colleagues like, I don't know why I'm not getting promoted. I'm not sure why I'm not getting more money because I've done so much work. Well, here's the thing. And I hope this podcast and this conversation helps open up your eyes to the idea that, you know what? There could be a need for more personal accountability and how you go about managing that whole entire conversation. Because again, you're one individual potentially on a team of 10, 20, 30 people. Management can only do so much.
Right.
Right. And recognize who you are and what you add.
Yeah. And I don't want to use the word stand out, because that could mean a whole bunch of stuff, right? You're just the loudest person in the room, which doesn't always mean that you're the best person in the room, right? But how do you distinguish yourself from your colleagues to say, you know what, I am a bit more assertive. I am a bit more ambitious. I would like to do more with respect to going up the management stream or being a stronger individual contributor. Like, you can decide, but you have to find a way to let your manager know that. Because to your point, Daniela, if you have 10, 20, 30 people on a team, how do you distinguish yourself from your other people, from your other team members?
Or vice versa, be realistic that, hey, and you can include this as a part of your conversation with your manager. I am here to ensure that I support the others and whatever that looks like, right? I'm the steady state. You don't want to necessarily use that word, but you have some value proposition that you want to celebrate, even though you're not striving for that next level. That's important too. I don't know. I at least think it is. I'm a damn good project manager and I deliver on projects. I don't need to be a manager of people. I don't need to be in the PMO. Right. I don't need to be the star performer. I just want to deliver my projects on time, on budget, on scope, and have my team happy. That's a very valid type of goal.
No question.
Yeah. So we're sitting in a performance evaluation and our managers give us feedback that we don't agree with. We're not aligned to it. We disagree. Or they give us a growing edge that we disagree with. What do? How do we approach that?
Take a moment to reflect.
Yeah. Again, don't let anxiety get the better of you.
And don't let anger come through.
Yeah.
Like what you say matters.
Yeah. Again, take a breath and ask them to expand on it.
Or if they expand on it and you still don't align with it, flat out say, I think I need some time to reflect on this conversation.
Or if you're comfortable, just say, I struggle with that. This is how I see it. And, you offer your perspective.
Yeah.
Words matter.
It does.
And again, it's one person's opinion, although they're a manager, because ultimately they have needs that need to be met. And there could be a perspective that, you've done this before, it matches my need. Okay, I'm going to put it in there. Even though that may not be of interest to you. So maybe you time box it. Maybe you look at it from, again, a different lens. The idea here is, at least from my opinion, nothing is set in stone. It is a conversation and it's an evolving topic.
How do you manage the perceived hierarchy in that dynamic, though? That they are my manager, they are writing my performance review, they are more or less in control of my evaluation, my bonus, my merit increase, my, ability to be promoted, things like that. How do you balance that perception in the moment when you've gotten feedback that you just don't agree with?
Well, I can share my own personal opinion. I mean, it is sticky. My situation was sticky, being told negative team dynamics. I didn't sign the performance review in that moment. I did take time to look at it. They gave me a week. And I came back and I said, I'm sorry, I can't sign this. I don't agree with it. And I actually I counter-proposed, and I said, how about we look at this over the next 3 months? And I want the teams I'm working with to give me real-time feedback if possible. Because I want to see if I'm actually doing this. And so the situation was it was a toxic environment, but my manager kind of didn't have a choice because, in essence, I kind of put in place a conversation to really explore that performance gap or that growing edge. And because it only came up the one time and she couldn't tie it back to an actual specific incident, I mean, I hate to say it, but there wasn't really a line of sight to again, they didn't document it.
Yeah.
Right. So that documentation kind of goes both ways as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What comes up for me anytime I've disagreed with feedback is I've got a framework. There's two paths. You're either going to take the agree and commit. So, yep, I fully align to this. I'm going to commit. I'm going to change. I'm going to do something differently. I'm going to grow. And then there's that second path, which is not to just disagree, walk away. For me, it's what's the nugget. So find the nugget in the situation and walk away with that. An example here would be when I first became a manager, a peer, so it wasn't even my manager, a peer had actually given me feedback that two pieces. One, in group conversations, I can stay quiet for a long time. And then close to the end, I chime in. And I tend to summarize and, talk about, okay, so this is what it sounds like we're doing. And then that's it. I finish what I say. And the feedback was that I can be rather matter of fact when I speak. And what that makes them feel like is that I'm closed to conversation, any further conversation after I speak. Now, I disagree with the feedback from the perspective of, I mean, that comes down to how I process information. I'm not this person that's going to be super quick on my feet and engaging. I want to listen to different perspectives, especially if I don't have an opinion on a topic. Let me just listen. Let me absorb. Let me formulate my opinion. And so I can't change how my brain works from that perspective. Okay. I can't agree and commit to that. But what I hear in the feedback is something that I never want people to feel, which is that I have the last word and then there's nothing that comes after that. That's not who I want to be. I don't want to be seen that way. I don't think that's a very open way of communicating. And so for me, the nugget was, okay, I'm going to say my piece and what my thoughts of, the conclusions I've had from listening, but let me ask a question at the end to make sure people understand the door is still open. So the question could be, does that make sense? Did I miss anything? Are we aligned? What are your thoughts? And that was my nugget.
You know what I really love about that anecdote? There's an implied continuous improvement, growth mindset. And it also says that to whoever is our listener, and even to ourselves, when performance reviews are happening, it's a day-to-day thing. And so you also can give yourself permission to give that feedback to somebody else that you work with. You don't have to be their manager, but you're offering them a suggestion. And that, I think, creates a more healthy work environment. Because, how powerful would that have been if whoever I had impacted came to me and said, hey, you made me feel like crap that day, rather than escalate to my director, who then waited 4 months to share this.
I also think that comes down to how you show up. So if you're going not only to your manager, but to other individuals that you work closely with, and you're seeking out that feedback, it also then allows them to understand, hey, this might end up one day turning into a two-way conversation. Or they might start getting comfortable and saying, you know what, you ask me all the time. Is there anything you think that I could be doing differently? How did you think I did in this presentation? And you end up creating that culture with the folks that you work with that is going to help you grow in the long run.
And build the trust.
Yes.
Having those open conversations builds trust, and I think eliminates I don't like to use the word, but the uncomfortableness, the weirdness of performance reviews, because it just becomes part of our daily life of saying, hey, I noticed this, did great. Again, it's that format of 2 things you did great. Here's a growing edge that I like to suggest.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that. A lot of times, some of this feedback of saying, oh, you're a little too harsh here, or, you're closing doors here. Sometimes it's situational too. Sometimes you need to close the door on something, right? So it's not just feedback of, blah, 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 blah. You're not creating a collaborative environment, but you almost need to kind of provide the full story as to sometimes how this feedback came about. That, in this situation, this is how I read the room. I needed to make sure things got done, and I needed to be a little bit more forceful. And guess what? That's okay sometimes, because not every situation is the same. And sometimes you need to be a bit more assertive, let's say, use that word, just to kind of get things across. And again, that's to me a growing edge, that you as an individual, when to turn it on and when not to turn it on. And I think that's important too, to understand the maturity of the organization, of an employee, and again, a growth. When do you use that different methodology, if you will? And I'm sorry if someone got offended by it, but unfortunately, this is the situation we're in right now. It wasn't personal. It was just, we need to kind of get moving on this. And right now, there's no room. Probably more of a boomer thing, I know, but sometimes it'll lay down the law.
It's important to call it out, right?
Yeah.
Because those dynamics haven't changed as much as we want to say.
Yeah, I think in alignment to that too, because I know earlier we talked about how you write your self-review sets you up for how you're going to receive your performance evaluation, how you're following up throughout the year with your manager or key stakeholders for feedback and growing edges. That also sets your awareness for that event at the end of the year, which is your performance review. I think the other element to that too is throughout the year, you're you need to be ready to engage and receive. It's not just at your performance evaluation or that time of year. And so throughout the year, if you're asking your manager for feedback or growing edges, if you're asking your stakeholders, if you're thinking about your self-review and the mindset that it creates of, am I going to, be happy or upset coming out of my performance evaluation, it all comes down to having a mindset year round to be ready to engage and receive, or receive and engage.
Mm-hmm.
We're organic human beings.
We are.
We will always be growing and changing, and everything is happening. And the idea that performance review is a one-time, once a quarter incident just doesn't fit with who we are.
It doesn't. So on that note, any other takeaways, divas? We've had a very fulsome conversation about being the receiver of employee reviews and comments. What are we walking away with?
Don't be afraid of performance reviews.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of finding your voice, advocating, again, we use that word, advocating for what you want, but also be open to people sharing. It's a work environment. The idea here is we are rowing in the same boat to make the company better. And that performance review, when you're on the job, doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same performance review from your family and friends. Two different hats.
Yeah.
And you can park that hat at work when you go home.
Yeah. I love that shift from thinking about a performance review being an event at the end of a year to just performances happening all the time. I know we also talked about getting things in writing when you're setting objectives with managers and stuff like that. I'd say straight up tip is keep a log all year round. Keep a log of your accomplishments. Do not just rely on your memory at the end of the year, because if you're anything like me, you will forget what you did. So definitely keep a log and just be open throughout the year. Be ready to receive and engage and own your performance year round.
That's good. And also to remember, transparency, huge, right? And if you do want that next project, if you do want to be have that next skill set, get that extra training, let your manager know. They can't read your mind. And so if you do want to move up in the organization or be a stronger individual contributor, let them know, because sometimes when a manager has a large team to look after, they don't always know who wants to make a difference. And just being the loudest person in the room doesn't always say that you are necessarily the best employee and the one who really wants to go forward.
Thanks for listening to The Coaching Divas. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and follow us on Instagram at The Coaching Divas.
Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it.
Until next time, we are
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, The Coaching Divas.
If you're going to coach, might as well coach like a diva.